Welcome back to another episode of The Dish TV. I'm Renita Malhotra Hora, Head of Marketing and Communications at SRI International. And I have with me today Dayne Freitag. He is the Technical Director of the Artificial Intelligence Center here at SRI. Hi, Dayne.
Hi, Renita.
I've been hearing quite a lot about a few of the projects coming out of the AI Center recently. One is called Dazzle, and one is called DTI. What can you tell me about either of these projects, or both of them, one by one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about each of those. So DASL, DASL, stands for Deep Adaptive Semantic Logic. It is a very good example of a third wave AI solution. So what Dazzle does is it takes so-called domain theory, so basically a description of a problem that is understandable to humans using the symbolic type of representation, and it turns that into a neural network so that it can be trained against data. And this has a number of desirable effects. One effect is human experts understand what's going into it. Dazzle can justify its actions in terms of this domain theory so that they know what's going on. It's a way for it to explain its actions. But it also learns much more quickly because it has essentially these rules of thumb that human experts have given it, and it isn't just staring at a bunch of data without any context. So what it tries to do is perform the task that the data poses it while staying true to the domain theory. And that has a number of very kind of desirable qualities, kind of chief among them, this much more rapid learning. So domain terminology induction is a kind of is a technique that that natural language processing researchers in my group have developed in the service of this speed of deployment. So as in many areas of AI, natural language processing requires that you train machine learning models to do specific tasks, and that's expensive. And often so expensive that people who might want to use natural language processing technology can't afford it for their problem. So what domain terminology induction, or DTI, does is it basically analyzes large collections of human language data. So let's take the scientific literature, for example. It can process the literature, say the biology literature, and automatically form an understanding of the things mentioned in that literature. So it will figure out that, okay, this is a particular type of assay, this is a particular type of protein, and it'll associate all those things together, which greatly reduces the amount of work required to deploy an actual end system on this scientific literature.
So it helps us read scientific literature, interpret it, make sense of it?
Yeah, precisely. So it doesn't really understand it in the same sense that we do, but what it does is infer the relevant concepts. Think in terms of words and phrases. It will understand, so proteins are very commonly mentioned in the biology literature. It can automatically figure out that, okay, all the following expressions are of the same type. And we can come in and say, oh yeah, those are proteins. So when we build our application, just understand that those are proteins, and maybe you want to find out information about proteins. So let me maybe move it to a more intuitive domain. So suppose we're looking at news reports about sporting events. Mm-hmm. What DTI can do is automatically figure out that, okay, there are multiple types of sports, and that football involves touchdowns, and here are the names of all the teams, and here are some of the players involved, and it involves this notion of a pass, etc. Hockey involves goals, here are the teams in this particular subliterature. So it learns these things automatically, and no one ever has to tell it about these things, which is a big advantage. We can come in after the fact and say, okay, yeah, all these phrases refer to teams, and all of these phrases refer to, these are scores. This is a play that is involved in this particular sport, etc.
So I have a good sense of DTI, how it works, and the application possibilities. For Dazzle, I mean, you explained Dazzle, but how could I see this applied in industry?
In coordination with the biosciences division, SRI is actually, thinking about commercial opportunities. So the specific use case in that area is automated chemical synthesis. So we're working with a group of chemists. Typically, chemistry involves a fair amount of high-touch activity. Chemists have to move things around in test tubes and raise things to particular temperatures and keep them there, run them through centrifuges and so on. Our biosciences partners have developed a platform called Symphony, which involves automated synthesis of chemicals. So big hardware platforms, among other things, combined with smart software to automate the search for ways to synthesize a particular chemical and then do it without a human having to shepherd it through the process. And this is kind of a breakthrough technology if it can be scaled up. On our part, though, we're trying to kind of push the automation even further. So Symphony, you need to know what compounds you want to produce and have some notion about whether it is synthesizable. But what if you just have a set of properties you want that compound to have? So in our case, we're talking about compounds that can be used to treat human diseases. Mm-hmm. And we know we want to suppress a particular gene or attack a particular pathogen. And we know we need solubility of a certain kind and toxicity at a certain level. So you just have that. You don't know what compounds necessarily match that. So what we're trying to do with Dazzle is something called inverse design. So come to us with these functional properties that you want, and we will nominate novel compounds that have never been synthesized before that we believe have these properties. So this, if we can get this to work, would be a true breakthrough, because no longer would you have to go out to the field and collect plants and try to figure out what their medicinal properties are or read extensively in the literature. Instead, you can say, I want a compound to do X, and the Dazzle model would be able to say, here's a good candidate for that. The way we're achieving that in Dazzle is, of course, training it on examples of this, a set of compounds that the structure of which is given and the properties of which have been measured, and we're trained Dazzle to understand that relationship between structure and properties. But those data sets are very expensive to create. We're talking about a small number, hundreds of compounds. So consequently, we're using this ability of Dazzle to kind of incorporate human knowledge, in this case, chemists' knowledge about the relationship between structure and properties, to greatly reduce the amount of training required, all with an end to producing a model that effectively can nominate important new compounds for, in this case, for medical science.
So Dayne, what is it that the AI Center should be known for to the outside world?
I think this notion of kind of making deployment of AI feasible can be generalized, right? So what we do is we provide ways for smaller outfits like government agencies to realize the benefits of artificial intelligence on their problems. So AI, of course, has exploded in recent years, but much of that is driven within kind of commercial labs, labs within some of the tech industry titans, involving huge numbers of resources and the massive overhead of training, very sophisticated machine learning models. Those companies aren't necessarily motivated by a desire to share the benefits. They want to monetize the benefits of their solutions. I think SRI, as a not-for-profit, has an opportunity to be a kind of democratizing force, to bring the benefits of AI to places where they otherwise couldn't be realized because of the very high resource overheads or the proprietary nature of solutions that are created within the big commercial entities. So I personally would like to see SRI known for that legacy, to its ability to to kind of allow many different people who could benefit from AI to actually realize that benefit.
A pleasure to speak with you today, Dayne. Thank you so much for joining us on Dish TV.
Thanks a lot, Renita. It was fun.